From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Issue 1, Tracking the Trail.
So just step away right there.
Avoiding protesters, Mr. Sanders renewed his efforts to win next Tuesday's California Democratic primary. But Bernie's bullish behavior is attracting ire from those who want him to endorse Hillary Clinton before July's Democratic Party convention. And note this.
But what I don't want is when I raise millions of dollars, have people say, like this sleazy guy right over here from ABC. He's a sleaze in my book. You're a sleaze because you know the facts, and you know the facts well.
Never want to be left out of a news cycle. Mr. Trump this week claimed unfair reporting on his veterans' fundraising efforts. But Mr. Trump also faced new pressure with court documents, shining his now closed Trump University in an unenviable light. That lawsuit is one of 3,500 involving Mr. Trump during his career. Finally, Mrs. Clinton this week brushed aside a State Department report that heavily criticized her email practices as Secretary of State. Instead, the former First Lady labeled Donald Trump in rather unsympathetic terms.
He is not just unprepared. He is temperamentally unfit to hold an office that requires knowledge, stability, and immense responsibility.
Question, what's up on the trail? I would point out that Hillary Clinton is still struggling to defeat Bernie Sanders, while Donald Trump has locked up his nomination. Who expected that outcome 6 months ago, Patrick?
Here's the situation. Everybody expected Hillary Clinton to win. I don't know if they expected Bernie to be as strong as he is right now. Here's the situation. Hillary got hammered with an IG report from State. Hillary could lose, conceivably, the California primary to Bernie. And also, you've got the FBI primary coming up, which if she's indicted, it's all over. But let's assume she gets through that. She's looking very strong as the Democratic nominee. Eventually, by the end of July, Bernie's going to be behind her, and they're going to have a united party, I believe. And she has an electoral advantage and a demographic advantage for the Democratic Party. So if she can get through what she's got right in front of her, she could be the favorite. Now, Trump, I think Trump is the candidate of change. He's running in polls. No one believed he would be tied with Hillary Clinton now, but they got problems in terms of bringing this party together, getting surrogates behind him, uniting and focusing on his winning issues, which are trade and immigration and a new America First foreign policy.
Way to go, Pat. I like the part where you talk about Hillary Clinton being strong for the general election, because I think the general election campaign essentially kicked off this week. The speech that Clinton delivered in San Diego, a foreign policy speech, it was a political speech, and she said what many Americans have been saying and what a lot of Republicans have been saying is that Donald Trump is not fit for the presidency and you don't want him anywhere near the nuclear codes. It's a very effective speech. She's finally got off the mat. She's in the ring. And this is a critical time because people's attitudes really start to crystallize now. You can't wait until the convention. And as for Trump, he's feeling the heat this week. The media finally has made the turn. He's getting a lot of pressure about his business dealings and his temperament. And so, hey, we're off to the races.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a very interesting week. I would disagree with Eleanor and Pat on the point of Bernie and Hillary, though. I actually think those tensions there are really significant behind the scenes. And I think you see that in Bernie Sanders' anger in interviews, very visible, and his supporters in terms of how they are rejecting the Clinton campaign. The question is, does she have the charisma and unity, and will she give enough to Bernie in terms of ground moving towards the left to get that?
Well, they say they're angry at Hillary and rejecting her campaign, but they said the same thing 8 years ago when Barack Obama beat Hillary Clinton in the end of a very long, drawn-out primary process. And it turned out, once we got into the general election, that both sides returned to their usual corners,
I do think
people came back home.
Right. Look, I think Trump will unite the Democratic Party and Democratic base.
No doubt about it.
And Hillary will unite the Republican
That's right.
base. Right. And what we're going to do is we're going to be between the 45-yard lines, is where this is going to be won if somebody can get 51 or 52. But I think that's where we're headed for in a very polarized election.
It's a very competitive race on the Democratic side, but eventually there's a winner and there's a second place finisher. And I think Bernie Sanders is going to recognize that.
Also, the current polls don't reflect Hillary Clinton's speech. I think that's going to have a big effect on California voters.
We'll see.
Well, Jerry Brown's endorsement in California, I mean, he's king of the hill in California.
Let me get in here. There is a risk, though, I think, and this is important. If you look at those statistics with Trump and the polling data, not just at the national level, but Ohio, Pennsylvania, and also what we saw in San Jose this week with those protests against Trump, that is going to have a big impact, I think, with the Republican establishment. People like me who see that, who don't like Trump, are going to see that and say, you know what, I'm voting for Trump just because I'm mad with
Clarence, if you saw what happened at the Trump rally, that woman backed up against a fence with this crowd all over, throwing eggs at her, waving Mexican flags. If Trump picks that up and turns that around and says this is a Sanders-Clinton operation, they're doing it every one of my, and they ought to apologize for it and tell them to stop it, I think he's got a real issue, just like 68. You were there in 68.
Instead, he picks up on it by going after the judge in the Trump U case and noting that he's Mexican. He's born in Indiana. So, you know, there are ways to exploit that issue that are going to backfire.
And Trump has ways of stepping on his own message, which was what happened there. And it's happened before. The fact is that these violent outbursts are terrible, but Trump doesn't do anything to discourage them.
Question for the gentleman on my left. Who has more credibility, Trump or the media attacking him?
Well, Trump in terms of the populism. Look, there is a media bias against Trump, but there is also a reporting element that he doesn't like because he has authoritarian tendencies.
And
but there is also but one of the things that is difficult, I think, is that you see, and the best example would be the email situation. As I was speaking to a young platoon commander today, and he was talking about how his guys, his soldiers, why they like Trump, because he says it how it is. And if you look at Hillary Clinton's email situation with the classified material on there, she says it wasn't marked, but also with how the media has reported on what is a counterintelligence scope investigation by the FBI, there is a bias that is very real, and it angers people.
The bias is in the eye of the beholder. Anybody who thinks Hillary Clinton hasn't been scrutinized hasn't been awake for the last 30 years.
What about the FBI investigation?
I do
you
think
the media is reporting seriously?
They haven't reported yet. The FBI hasn't reported back
yet.
yet.
Trump's all-out attack on the media this week, and he's pulling out, naming individuals. You really got a sense of real collective hostility on the part of the media in that press conference where Trump went in. And Trump had a point. The guy raises $5.6 million or whatever it is for the vets, and he's vetting all these things, and it's going slowly. And they're attacking a guy for something he didn't know.
Because he didn't turn over most of the money until after the media reported.
What are you knocking the guy for?
Trump is a crybaby, Pat. He's a big crybaby. That's what he
looked
like.
When does the media raise $5.6 million?
I do all this nice stuff for these veterans, and the media gives me this bad coverage. Of course, it's bad coverage.
He
said he'd raise $6 million, and then later said, "I never said that," and when it's right on videotape.
He's raised
then he comes up with $4 million overnight after the news report comes out, and then he says, "I was going to do that anyway."
He came up with it, didn't he?
He's a crybaby.
He came up with it when the glare of publicity was turned on him. And if you're going to run for president, you release. Excuse me. You release. Excuse me, please. You release your income tax returns. Every president in modern times has released their income tax returns. He has refused to do that. Is that media bias to keep on him for that?
Good for him. Telling the media where to go.
Yeah, the voters are going to tell him where to go.
Let me quote some polls.
Well, good for the media telling him where to go.
Thank you.
Let me post some polls here. Post and quote. Who has more credibility, Trump or the media attacking him?
Depends on who you ask.
Yeah, that's right.
Which media?
Hold your tongue. An API poll this spring found only 6% of Americans have a lot of confidence in the press. In a new Rasmussen poll this week, 30% say Trump is more honest than more politicians.
I think a lot of people have been disappointed in the media for letting Trump get this far and not scrutinizing him. And beating up on the media has a time-honored history here. Spiro Agnew made a career on that before he went to jail.
Nattering nabobs of negativism.
I don't buy this. People know what Trump is like. We've seen him every day, and
They're
people
learning
like
more.
it.
They're learning more.
I think people, whatever you said, Clarence, I think people say about Trump, you may not like the guy, and he should be saying it, but he speaks his mind. Whereas they think
so do I.
They think the press calling itself objective is ridiculous.
I'm waiting for the Kanye West campaign in 2020. He speaks his mind too. I mean, that's kind of what Trump is like. He's a showman, but he doesn't know anything. You know, he was asked about Brexit and hemmed and hawed like he never heard it before.
You speak for the media right now.
Who's ahead, Trump or Hillary?
Now it's about dead even, but if you
but
look down the road.
We don't elect on national vote. Just ask Al Gore about that. He would have been president. He won 5 million more votes than.
But I think you're going to have to wait till after the convention. But there's no question.
Hillary's the favorite.
That Trump's got problems he's got to deal with, and Hillary's got problems she's got to deal with. And the key thing is if Hillary gets by the FBI thing and gets into this convention and out of it, I think the Democratic Party would probably be favored generally.
And if Donald Trump gets by this Trump University thing.
That's really
I don't think he's good.
The Democrats do have a structural advantage, and so Hillary Clinton, by whatever measure you have, is the favorite.
But
it doesn't mean she's guaranteed to win, but she is the favorite.
If she cannot unify the Bernie people, and if Trump really does have that statistical advantage that you see in growing in Pennsylvania, Ohio, with the Reagan Democrats actually returning to the fold, that's how he wins.
And if there's an
there's a lot of ifs in there, you know.
No, there is. This is the campaign of ifs, is it not?
That's why this is fun to cover, because there's a lot of ifs out there.
You know, if the FBI report comes in like the IG report from State Department, Hillary could have real problems. An indictment,
if the FBI report
an
cannot find
indictment,
a
and you'll be
motive.
looking at Biden.
If the FBI report cannot find that she intended to breach national security,
she will be
there's not gonna be much
indicted,
of a story.
but you keep throwing it out there as though it were a certainty.
Is this going to be a pocketbook election or a foreign policy election? Buchanan.
I think it's going to be more a pocketbook election. But clearly, Hillary feels, because of the polls and because of others, the press attacking Trump on foreign policy, she feels that that's a good position for her to be on and in. And she may be right, but Trump will try to move it back to jobs, and I think he will. Jobs in the economy.
I think national elections are always bread and butter elections, but I wouldn't count Hillary out on that score either.
Unpredictability. The jobs report was bad. ISIS threat is growing. Hillary is in the lead at the moment, but everything could change, and I think it may well.
I don't know if you noticed, but our allies have been pushing ISIS back recently, and I think unless the situation changes, unless you've got the fabled terror attack that frightens everybody into voting for Trump, I think it actually looks good for Hillary right now.
In Germany.
Yeah, I mean, it had to be a real heck of an attack to get everybody to want to turn to Donald Trump for help when he doesn't seem to know that you couldn't drop a nuke in Europe. But he's talking about, the man's lack of knowledge is truly astounding, and yet he keeps getting ahead.
Yeah.
Well,
The
presidential.
billions of dollars.
Amazingly, he must not believe the press.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing new about that, Pat. But the press is a pretty big institution. But the fact is, the press keeps coming up with facts about Donald Trump and the veterans and various other things.
Then? Why isn't the
We're not
press
just talking
believed?
about opinion. What?
Why isn't the press believed?
Well, why isn't Trump's core growing more than it has been?
He's running even for president of the United States.
Well, that's because,
we
that's
don't
because he
elect
just got the
nationally,
nomination.
though.
Yeah, that's because he's clinched his nomination while Hillary Clinton is still in that process right now. But wait a few months.
You realize she's been in the White House, well, let's see. She was in for 2 terms.
8 years.
Right.
8 years.
That's First Lady.
As First Lady. She left the White House and she took a job as
She was elected senator
Like a
of
senator
New York.
that's a job.
Right.
He took
not
that
what you
job,
take,
United
though.
States
Didn't take it.
Senator.
She was elected fair and
Right.
square.
United States Senator
Right.
from New York.
Right.
So that's a lot of experience right there.
Yeah, what a shame. She's got all that experience, right? Let's go for somebody with no experience in government. That's what Trump is campaigning
Barack
on.
I think John is heading towards saying something nice about Hillary, actually.
Are you? Oh, my goodness. Go right ahead.
No, I said she's a quick start.
Let's do another
Okay.
issue, John.
You know, her experience is unexcelled, I'd say,
Yep.
modern history.
But this is an election where experience can be a negative, right?
No, I don't know about that. Issue 2, Gary's Gambit.
So, Donald,
North Dakota native and Republican governor of New Mexico from 1995 to 2003, Gary Johnson is the Libertarian Party's nominee for President of the United States. Mr. Johnson is no newcomer to presidential politics. In 2012, he won just under 1% of the national vote as Libertarian Party nominee. But this year, Mr. Johnson, age 63, has set his sights far higher, perceiving voter disillusionment with presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton and presumptive Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump. Mr. Johnson believes the game's afoot, and polls taken this month suggest Mr. Johnson has, get this, the support of 10% of likely voters. What does Mr. Johnson stand for? Well, he supports massive reductions in federal spending, unrestricted abortion rights, privatizing Social Security, expanded school vouchers, free trade, a pathway to citizenship for illegal immigrants, relaxed narcotics laws, and a foreign policy disentangled from the world. You got the picture?
Yeah.
Yep.
Assess Gary's gambit.
Well, I think 10% support already, and hardly anybody knows who he is. He's off to a very interesting start here right now, especially for Republicans who are frustrated, and for that matter, some Democrats who are frustrated by the choices that they've got right now.
Yeah, these are two Republican governors. He's got former Massachusetts Governor William Weld as his running mate. They both were successful governors. I think there's an absence certainly at the top in terms of the commander-in-chief quality. I mean, Gary Johnson is known mostly for wanting to legalize marijuana, but I think they are two smart people. They've got ballot access in all 50 states, and they're a nice landing spot for people who really can't vote for Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. Their message is, we're not Trump and we're not Hillary. So that could be a strong message this year.
Who's he drawing key votes away from?
I think he would take more from the Republicans.
Here's the problem for him.
The answer is Hillary.
Yeah, but John.
Why is that?
Why is that?
Well, because if Bernie Sanders, if Hillary cannot unify the Bernie Sanders young people onto her ticket, they will never go for Trump. That's true. Well, they won't likely go for Trump, but they will potentially go for Johnson, and how that then has the impact of being like a third-party Democratic ticket that severs away that.
But the Republicans are a more libertarian party, so that's why I think they would cause more trouble
young
for
people.
But when John Anderson left the Republican Party in 1980 and broke away,
a moderate,
it came, but
one of
his
rare
vote
creatures.
came from Carter. It turned out much more than it did from Reagan.
Right.
And Carter came down. And these guys, I mean, their views on abortion, their views on marijuana and things like that are very, to the left, they're very consistent with the basis of the Democratic Party. So I think it's too early to say who they're going to draw from. They're charismatically challenged is one of their problems. I watched the two and I thought you're entering a funeral parlor and these are guys that tell you which room to go to, So I think they got that problem, but I think they're going to diminish. I mean, these third parties, having been one, you could be up there in those polls, and the longer you go on, the more you diminish. And the question is, do they get in the debates? And if they don't get in the debates,
and they have to get up to 15% in several
they don't
polls
look
to get into the
15%
debates.
to me.
And the Libertarian ticket got 1% in the last election. So it doesn't look that promising.
Who is David French, and what impact will his candidacy have?
Bill Kristol's candidate in National Review, I think, in the Weekly Standard. He's a very nice fellow. He's a writer for National Review. Nobody knows who he is. I don't know that he's fully committed himself to do this. And Kristol is making himself look ridiculous.
That was a big nothing burger after a lot of tweets about how he was going to produce this super credible candidate.
Well, I mean,
you know what the movement is?
Never Trump.
Never Trump. How'd you know that?
He didn't start it. He joined it.
Yeah.
I mean, French joined it. He didn't start it.
No, Kristol.
But he's the first. I'm talking Bill Kristol.
Yeah, well, how did that work out?
Very well.
Well, that's the problem. I mean, French is a very attractive candidate, except that nobody knows who he is.
He's a good candidate for Congress, but President of the United States.
That's right.
And that
that's
might
right.
be what it is, Tennessee, right? That
Will he
may
draw
consider
about as many as the Green Party? The Green Party?
No,
No, the
first
Green
of all,
Party's
they're-
better known than he is. I mean, it's very
Green
hard
Party's
to
got a great
measure
cause.
this.
I mean, the environment's a
they're
great
not on
cause.
they're not on the ballot anywhere.
No.
and
all these
some of the
deadlines
states
are passing.
Exactly.
You know? He can't get on in Texas.
Yeah.
You only needed about
Or
100,000
Illinois.
signatures.
Can't get on in
I
Illinois. either.
look, he's a very decent man, combat veteran, but I think it will, ultimately, I think Gary Johnson will have much more of a formative impact on the outcome of the race.
Gary
French
Johnson
gonna
were
get
a
in?
combat veteran, he'd be Crystal's choice. I mean, Crystal really wants the military component.
That's
And besides that, having being on the ballot in all 50 states is a big plus for the Libertarians. Because as you know, Pat, it's very hard to get on the ballots in any of these states.
Sure is.
There's very little time left.
Will Donald Trump win over conservative Republicans at the convention? Yes or no?
Paul Ryan came aboard, the whole House leadership is aboard, the Senate leadership is aboard. I think Trump has done a good job of uniting the party. What he's got to do is bring it together in terms of enthusiasm and all moving together like a great army, and it's not there yet.
Yeah, no, a lot of the senators that were running in states that Obama carried, they'll say they support the nominee. They don't even like to mention his name. There's a lot of uneasiness in the Republican Party. They don't know whether he's going to be leading them over the cliff or maybe they've stumbled onto a winner. They're not sure, and so everybody's kind of straddling the fences
very
now.
quickly, as a unity ticket, Donald Trump's best ally manifestly is the far left of the American political spectrum in the sense of that kind of violence. That makes Republicans say, you know what? I'm going to vote for Trump.
Just like Hillary Clinton's best ally is Donald Trump, and the fright he puts into a lot of swing voters out there. But yeah, we are in a situation where both choices are somewhat problematic. But in the past, the most unified party tends to be the one that wins. And in this case, Democrats and Republicans at this point each have some disunity in different ways. I would suspect the Democrats have a better chance of pulling
And it's
themselves
really
together.
devolved into a personality contest. But for people who don't like Donald Trump and don't like Hillary Clinton, just look, what issue do you care about? The issue distance between the two parties has never been greater. Climate change, reproductive rights, guns. You know, I'm sure the Buchanan, Buchanan brigades are on one side, and I would be on the other. But that should make a vote very easy for anybody in November.
Issue 3, mobilizing against mosquitoes.
WHO's response to the concern about the timing of the Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro is that based on a very careful risk assessment and all the information we've gathered so far about this disease, these games should go ahead as planned, and we should continue to work to make sure they're as safe as possible.
150 scientists asked for this summer's Olympic Games in Brazil to be delayed or relocated. Why? The Zika virus. The World Health Organization said no. Still, Zika, which is transmitted by mosquitoes and causes birth defects, has afflicted many South Americans, and experts fear that this summer it may spread to the U.S. But note this. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has come up with a new plan to use school students as intelligence officers in the war on Zika. Speaking to the Associated Press last month, the USDA's Lee Cohen State outlined how schools could assign students to monitor mosquitoes and send their data to the USDA. Cohen State says that parents should not be afraid because testing for mosquito presence does not attract the insects. Students are simply directed to put brown paper towels into water-filled dark-colored cups. A week later, the students dry the towel and search for mosquito eggs, which quote-unquote look like tiny specks of dirt. Question, should we enlist students to fight the Zika virus? I ask you, Tom Rogan.
Yeah, I think we should for two reasons. Number one, there isn't that risk, and it engages students in the importance of scientific research. It helps the country, and it's something fun that they can get involved in. And number two, actually, if you look at the president's budget request, it's a good example of, I would say, of liberal governance gone wild, in the sense that there are some things that are very good and Republicans should pass the spending, but there is a lot in that fact sheet, and I would say to the viewers, John, don't take my word for it, go and look at it, a lot of repetitive things, that double-sided programs that they could just do in one, tens of millions for PR programs, hundreds of millions for sending people out to monitor certain mosquitoes, etc. That it is overloaded and it is overblown. And if we can reduce costs and have an educational benefit, we should.
Yeah.
They have to empty those cups on time before mosquitoes can breed. There will be 7 who forget. 7. There are approximately 20 million students aged 12 to 18 in the U.S. education system. If 10 million participate, we are creating 10 million mosquito breeding pools.
That's not.
Unless emptied.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like.
No, science teachers across the country are excited about this. There's no danger. The mosquitoes are already there. They're just trying to get more information where this particular kind of mosquito is that breeds the Zika disease. It's called, the social scientists would call it social cohesion, getting the country involved in fighting this. But there are many other aspects to fighting Zika, and frankly, you know, the CDC is a responsible agency, and to sit there and nitpick what they're asking for and to use that as justification for the Congress to sit on this. You've got the governor of Florida in a total panic. He's got some 340 cases of women with Zika, many of them pregnant, and he hasn't gotten any of the help through. He's personally lobbied his fellow Republicans on the Hill. He's written a letter to the president. I mean, this is a possible looming crisis that we can do something about.
Tom's point is well taken, though. Every time, everybody agrees emergency legislation, but sure enough, they pile all this garbage in there that they've always wanted that is irrelevant to the real issue. Secondly, you got a real problem because Republicans are rightly saying, look, you got $202 billion. Where are the offsets so we don't damage the deficit? And so everybody said, look, it's emergency, just pile it onto the deficit. That's how we get into other problems.
Much bigger problem if you have to deal with all the health after effects if this crisis goes unattended to.
But you really
frankly, I have more respect for the scientists at CDC and knowing what they need.
Do you think they're going to spending $1 billion or $2 billion in the next couple of months? You're going to try to spend that to stop a bunch of mosquitoes?
We should give due diligence to whatever spending is being authorized here. But on the flip side, by midsummer, we could have a real panic across this country and people saying, why didn't somebody do something sooner?
Forced prediction. Will the House of Representatives initiate impeachment proceedings against IRS Commissioner Koskinen this summer? Pat.
Probably.
So what?
Yes.
No.
The answer is yes. Bye-bye.